Hey folks, welcome to the One DFS Breakdown with Jon B. It is Friday, 10/29/2021. The year is almost over. It's complete insanity. Nobody knows what happened to it. I know I sound like an even older guy than I am, just saying silly things like that, but it is what it is. Happy to be with you. It's been kind of a good week. I did okay last night. I didn't have a huge ROI. It was just enough to keep playing, and I'm happy with that. Nothing to really complain about there. I am definitely happy to be with you guys today. 7 games on the slate today. That's cool. I have a hard time with 10, 11, 12 game slates because it's just very difficult to get through them all in a timely manner, and usually have things to do. That involves me leaving the house and things, so for me right now, 6 and 7 game slates, 5 games, 4 games, whatever. Smaller slates, maybe not 3 games, but somewhere in the middle are better for me. And I'm looking forward to it. There's some injuries, today that we'll have to look at, keep an eye on. I'm going to play DraftKings today for no reason. I just felt like, why not get into one of those or 20 of those? So I'm going to probably just play a small contest there just to kind of feel it out a little because I haven't played much NBA there, believe it or not. I played mostly PGA over there, Millie Makers, things like that. But for basketball, it's almost always been exclusively Fanduel, which is great. Had a decent time there. Last year was a bit of an anomaly. Had a rougher time last year than previous years. This year's been better than last year already, not by a lot. We'll see what happens. We'll go and try to get the best lineup we can in today, or lineups. I think I'll play probably 150 lineups on FanDuel, 20 on DraftKings, and we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. The NBA is one of those things where you can have all the data in the world. You can do everything right, and you can lose every day. You can't make the players play a certain way. So that is what it is, and there's no getting around it. I'll turn my music down a little here because it's getting up there. I hope you guys have had a good week. I don't know. Maybe you did. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you're enjoying your time hanging out. Maybe you're not. I don't know. Either way, I'm just hanging out. I'm doing this anyway. I might as well do it online. Might as well do it where you have to look at my ugly mug, as I like to say. Hey, you guys, hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell if you want. Hit the like button on this stream. Those two things specifically, the like button, the subscribe button, they help me a little bit. They help us to move forward. We're kind of doing a soft launch right now. I think this is like week 2 of the stream, and so far, so good. We've had shows that were just totally ruined by technical snafus. The music was too loud. My screen didn't show up, where you just had to look at my face for an hour. Silly mistakes. That's what we're doing right now. We're getting the growing pains done. We're getting them out of the way. 2 or 3 weeks of that. And then in a week to 2 weeks, I hope to have a little bit better of a produced show, have some banners and logos and nonsense that doesn't really matter but looks good. So hopefully that'll be good. My model I am working on constantly. Right now it's more of a cheat sheet and less of a full DFS model, but it gives us tons of information. And with it, I've been able to put some pretty good lineups in. Haven't won anything huge, which is okay. It's early in the year, and you can't expect big wins. I guess you can, but I don't expect big wins ever. I hope for them and then feel good if they happen. If they don't happen, which is most of the time, you still feel good if you get some of your money back. So it's okay. We're not spending millions of dollars. We're not blowing anything out of the water. We're not going bankrupt. We're doing what we can do to have fun and play NBA DFS and gain more knowledge and things like that. So I've been having a great time spending time doing this. Got my office sort of cleaned up to some extent. My drums are finally out. My guitars are finally accessible. There's not a giant pile. I do have some boxes back here that need to go out, but other than that, I think we're just hanging tough. Breaking down DFS slates every single day, 5 days a week. On the weekends, I'm not, just because there's family stuff and things of that nature. The wife is home. Kids are around most weekends. And most days during the week too, I guess. So, but either way, that's okay. Their mom's been sick, so they've been home a lot more than normal, which is awesome. I love them. I love spending time with my kids. That's the number one thing I like to do. Sometimes you want to throw them down a mountain. Other times you're just so proud. So either way, I'll quit gushing about my family. We've got time today, 7 games. It's a pretty good slate. Like I said, injuries could dictate a few things, and salaries as well. I don't know what there's going to be for value, but we'll take a look and we'll find out what there could be. We'll see what's happening, and we'll go from there. Keep in mind, if I'm kind of doing this, I'm looking at 3 different monitors. I'm about to add a 4th monitor because I'd like to have a monitor specifically dedicated to production. Right now, I've got so much information up that my production stuff goes away, and so I can't quite see what you're seeing all the time. I do check in on it, but and toward the beginning I can see it, but then when we get started, it goes away. If I had a 4th monitor with just the production, that'd be pretty good. My wife thinks I'm a little crazy. Which is fine too. That's fine too. I am a little crazy. I think we all are. You kind of have to be a regular DFS guy or gal or person or whatever. It is what it is. It is what it is. All right, Friday. Man, Friday. So good. Big weekend coming up. So, all right, let's get through it. Let's take a look. Let's see what we can do, and let's try to win some money. I'm going to first, before I forget, let's get my face up in the corner so you don't have to stare at it as closely. Here I go. Here I go. Still getting smaller. There I go. All right. Right there. That looks pretty good. I don't know. You can see my face. You can see the screen. I think that's probably as good as we're going to get. All right, and then let's get this off the screen so we can see what we're actually looking at here. I'm just going to refresh while I'm sitting here. Injury reports, make sure nothing's changed in the last few minutes. We want to give you guys the best information we can, or at least the most up-to-date information at that time. It's 3 p.m. my time. I'm in Minnesota, so I know a lot of you guys are on the East Coast, some on the West Coast. But we have 3 hours till lock, I think. And so the information is current as of now, as far as what they put out. I can't tell you for sure that this is what it's going to be. So keep in mind, again, you guys, this is just my opinion. This information is based on math and data and analysis, but also some of my own, sort of formulas. So keep in mind, it's my opinion. I use it. I base my DFS on it. I encourage you guys to look at it. You're welcome to use it. And if you don't want to, you're welcome not to. But at the same time, opinions are opinions. It's fun to talk about things that we all have in common, so let's do that. We don't do enough of that in this country anymore. We like to focus on things that we don't have in common, and I'm guilty of sin on that one. So, but let's do better. Let's do better. Let's talk DFS. Let's hang out. I'm going to start out, I think, Orlando, Toronto. That's what ESPN is showing as far as lines go. Combined total on this one. Now, this is kind of good. Keep in mind, combined total on Orlando, Toronto in Las Vegas today, 206. So 206 is hilarious. That's going to be interesting. I think we have Toronto clear favorites in this one, but 206 total. I mean, I don't know if they're expecting this to be like to 112 to whatever, but it appears it's going to be a low-scoring game. The thing about Las Vegas is they don't lose a lot of money for a reason. Their numbers are pretty close a lot of times. Some guys have this at 205.5, others 209.5. 206 is the average. That doesn't bode well for this game. I mean, if you're really thinking about fantasy production. But let's look at it. Orlando, Toronto. We're going to start with. Let me go here. We will pull the game up. Unselect all. Orlando, Toronto. Okay. And we will start with Orlando. Whoop. Team, not game. That's the kind of thing I do all the time, is like, get that wrong. Orlando. Here we go. Wow. Well, there's one thing you can say about Orlando, and that's that they're all cheap. Right? They're all cheap. Or cheap-ish, let's say. Right now, let's look at the injury report. That's where I like to start. If we know who's injured, then we know what to talk about. Oftentimes, I get ahead of myself. I start talking about players that are injured, and then people are like, what the heck? Okay, Orlando, Etuan Moore day-to-day sideline. There is a little news snippet there, so let's take a look and see what that says. Moore has yet to appear. We'll sit out at least one more. All right, thanks for the info. MCW out indefinitely. Okiki, Fultz, Isaac all out indefinitely. I think we're aware of all those situations. Starting lineups is where I go second because this is where you find value in that starting lineup or projected starting lineup. Obviously, coaches can change that information at any time, but projected starting lineup gives us a lot of information because if there's dudes in it that aren't normal starters but produce off the bench, then you can find really good value playing those guys. If they're going to go from 18 or 20 or 22 minutes to 28 or 30 or 32 or 34 minutes, you can expect them to produce higher, and that's where you find value in DFS, at least partially. Cole Anthony, Jalen Suggs, Franz Wagner, Wendell Carter Jr., Mo Bamba. I'm pretty sure that's the same lineup they've been rolling out a couple days in a row here. But let's take a look at the numbers. I've been playing a lot of Cole Anthony. It's been paying dividends for me. $6,700 salary. It can't be beat. 32.6 minutes per game. 34.7 fantasy points per game. 1.07 fantasy points per minute. Decent usage rate, 25.3. He gets his value every night, 5.19x value. Is this guy going to get you the 34.3 that you need? That's less than he averages. So the likelihood, in my opinion, is probably, yeah. So especially playing against Toronto. Now, keep in mind, the low scoring total doesn't bode well. But that doesn't mean there can't be 2 or 3 guys on this team who are worth playing, or at least worth looking at in your lineup as a value play. Next on the list, Mo Bamba. I like Mo Bamba. 31 minutes a game, 32 fantasy points, 32.48 fantasy points per game, 1.05 fantasy points per minute. Hits his 5x value on the nuts. At 6,500, here's a guy at center or power forward. You're going to have to get to some of them. Maybe not a lot. Again, with the low scoring total in this matchup, maybe not a lot, but you're going to have to get to some Mo Bamba. Play him. Wendell Carter Jr. is another guy. I wish he got more minutes. His usage is low. Keep in mind, Mo Bamba's usage is low also. But at 6,100, 31.3 fantasy points per game, 1.12 fantasy points per minute. Here's another guy that averages his value, 5.14x value. That's something you can't overlook. You just can't. As much as you want to, let's see. W and H. Yeah. There's nothing you can do about that. So, 5.14x value on Wendell Carter Jr. I like this guy. I wish he got more than 28 minutes. At 34 minutes, I'd feel a lot better about playing him. The next guy, Franz Wagner. Here's a guy where you might find some value. Now, his fantasy point per minute production is not really there at 0.76. His value is there, 5.1x value, because his salary is $4,900. He's getting almost 33 minutes. He's getting 25 fantasy points. Franz Wagner could be a heck of a value play. Maybe not as much tonight, but definitely get to some Franz Wagner in your lineup. I will get to some, not a lot. Jalen Suggs, 30 minutes. This guy, we know what he can do, but he hasn't really done it yet. He does have a decent usage rate, 25.8. That leads the team. That's a great usage, but only 0.71 fantasy points per minute is not going to cut it, not going to get it done, in my opinion. 25 fantasy points at 21 fantasy points. I'm sorry. At 30 minutes a game, you need to see more out of him. You got to get him closer to a fantasy point per minute. I don't know. It's tough. At 4,600, he's worth a flyer. You can get him in 10% of your lineups and see what happens. Similar to Terrence Ross. Terrence Ross is a player I love. I wish he got 7 more minutes a game. 26.8 now. 0.62 fantasy points per game. Also not going to do it. That's not going to do it. He does hit his value, but just because he's so cheap at 4,200. That's kind of the interesting thing. RJ Hampton's a guy that could get minutes, but doesn't at 19. You're not going to want to mess around with him. Gary Harris, you know what he can do 1 out of every 10 games. He's got the talent, but he doesn't have the drive. He doesn't get the minutes, only 21 a game. 0.31 fantasy points per minute is awful. Fade all of those guys. So, interestingly, I kind of like Michael Mulder at the minimum on this team. He only gets 6 minutes a game, which is all garbage time, usually. But if you gave this guy, I think he needs more of a chance, 24 minutes a game, and we could see what he can do. I'd be interested in that. But Orlando's one of these teams. They're going to be a lottery team. It just is what it is. They're going to tank. That's fine. That doesn't mean there's not value. That doesn't mean these guys aren't going to produce. They're still going to play a basketball game, right? They're still going to play a basketball game. They're still going to put up 100-ish basketball points, and so fantasy points, there's 240 minutes that need to be filled. between the 5 starters. So some of these guys are going to get fantasy production. They're going to, regardless. So keep your eye on them. I like Cole Anthony. I like Mo Bamba. I like a little Wendell Carter. Like I said, if you want to get to some Franz Wagner, a little bit of Terrence Ross, Jalen Suggs, you can, but you don't have to. Moving on. Where am I? Gee whiz. Let's look at Toronto. It's another team I'm not in love with, at least this year. I think OG Anunoby was in the optimal the other day, which was interesting. Still showing Siakam expected to return in November. Utah day-to-day. Starting lineup in Toronto, Fred VanVleet, who I get too much of all the time. Gary Trent Jr., OG Anunoby, who I don't get enough of. Scottie Barnes, who I get to, and Precious, who I get to also, depending on the matchup, I suppose. Starting with Fred VanVleet, 8,100 is a lot for 38 fantasy points per game. 1.01 fantasy points per minute. I think that's dropping. I expect it to probably drop even farther. You need 39.6 out of him to hit value. 38 is, I don't know, not enough, in my opinion, for 8,100. I think you can probably get 38 fantasy points cheaper elsewhere. Doesn't average value, 4.7x value. OG Anunoby is probably a better play in my mind, because he's $900 cheaper. He's 34.6 minutes per game, so not a lot less minutes, but 36.76 fantasy points. So you're sacrificing just over a point, but saving $900. He averages more fantasy points per minute at 1.06. His usage is higher than Fred VanVleet, and he hits value at 5.1x value every night. So if I'm taking a guy out of those two, I'm picking an Anunoby. Keep in mind the low totals. I think Orlando's a pace up spot for Toronto, but I'm not totally sure. Scottie Barnes. Here's a guy I like. I like Scottie a lot. $6,000 is okay. I wish it was more like 57. 34.6 minutes per game, 30.44 fantasy points per game, and that's 0.88 fantasy points per minute. So, he needs to produce a little more, but VanVleet's in the game a lot, has a decent usage rate, as well as Anunoby. Chris Boucher has a decent usage rate. It's harder to get Scottie Barnes the ball, although at 21%, his usage isn't that bad, realistically. You only need 31.75 out of him to matter. He does average value at 5x value, 5.07x. Get to some Scottie Barnes. That's a pretty decent salary. I like Gary Trent at 5,100, 32.8 minutes per game, 27.8 fantasy points. His fantasy points per minute needs to go up. 0.85 is not going to cut it. But again, because his salary is low at 5,100, his 5.45x value. That's hard to avoid. So keep that in mind. I don't know if he'll boom or not. Here's a guy at 33.5 or better as a boom for him. So the chances are definitely there. Keep your eye on keep your eye on Gary. Precious Achua, whatever. 5,100, same salary. Less minutes, 26.6, but just over a fantasy point difference, 26.3. He gets more fantasy points per minute at 0.99, gets 5.16x value. Precious Achua is a good value play. I think that you're going to have to go there, I think, a little bit tonight, especially against Orlando. Chris Boucher, 4,700, doesn't get the minutes. He's got the talent, but doesn't get the minutes. 1.24x value. 1.24 fantasy points per minute. Not value, that'd be crazy. Less than 4x value, so probably not going there. Get to some Gary Trent, get to some Anunoby, get to some Scottie Barnes, get to some Precious. You can decide your own percentages on that. I'll probably get to 10 to 15% of all of them. Maybe a little more Precious, maybe a little more Scottie. I don't know. We'll take a look at that the closer we get as far as where we need to fill spots out. All right, guys, one game down, 6 to go. Next game on here, Indiana at Brooklyn. Let's take a look at that. Okay, we are going to start with Indiana, I believe. There it is. It's hot in my office today. Ooh, I closed the heat vent a little. It's still hot. Okay, guys, looking at this, 223.5 combined total on this game is much better than the 206 on the last game. Brogdon injured. I think that's what I saw. I haven't really looked at the report that much, but very, very interesting. Looking at the injury report for Indiana, Isaiah Jackson, Malcolm Brogdon, Keelan Martin, Karis LeVert, although Karis, I think he's coming back soon, and TJ Warren, which we know about. LeVert appears to be close to a return to game action as he is listed a questionable for the second time this week. He's given a similar label ahead of Wednesday's game against the Raptors, ultimately did not play. LeVert's eventual return will impact Chris Duarte the most, but fantasy managers should not rush to drop Duarte. He's still going to play, especially with Brogdon being injured, which is so interesting. Right now, LeVert is listed in the starting lineup, but with a Q tag showing TJ McConnell, Chris Duarte, LeVert, Sabonis, and Turner. So that's pretty interesting. Brooklyn's defense isn't that good. Well, let's take a look. Domantas Sabonis, I love this dude. As a pay-up option, $9,300 is not that bad. 39 minutes per game. He gets tons of minutes. He's like right up there with Julius Randle on minutes. 43.18 fantasy points per game. 1.1 fantasy points per minute. His usage is only 20.9. If I'm Sabonis, I'm going to be pushing to get my usage up closer to 30. If you're going to be one of the stars on this team, then you need to have the ball. And that's all there is to it. You got to get 44 out of Sabonis. I think in this matchup, you might get it. I guess it's hard to say. 4.64 X value is not quite there. I'll get to some Sabonis, not a lot. The reason I get to him on nights I'm unsure of him is because of his potential. You know, he only needs 44 to succeed, 54 to boom. I've seen him get 60 plus. He can do it. Not everybody can. And when you have a guy who can come out and get you 60 plus for 10,000 or less, you play him. Not in huge numbers necessarily, but definitely want to get to some of him because you don't want to miss it. You don't want to be, oh man, I needed Sabonis. Brogdon's injured. His numbers are so good. It's a bummer that he's injured because I like to play him. Karis LeVert, I don't really have any numbers on. Obviously, he hasn't played yet this season. We're not looking at all at last season numbers. All of my numbers are updated for this season only as of right now because that's the snapshot that matters as far as I'm concerned. Miles Turner, so hit and miss. That huge game first night, then came out and stunk it up with 11. You never know what you're going to get out of him. He's down to 24.4 minutes. That's not enough. 28 fantasy points per game. 1.15 fantasy points per minute is there, but he's got to play more minutes. You only got to get just under 31 from him. Doesn't average value. 4.93 value. I guess that's about as close as you can get to 5x value without being there. I wish he got more minutes. If he was playing 32 minutes, it's kind of I would play heavier on Miles Turner. He'll be in my player pool, but I'm in a low percentage. TJ McConnell, obviously with Brogdon out, I love McConnell tonight. $5,700. Only 22 minutes normally, but he's going to get more like 32 tonight. 17.98 fantasy points per game. 0.82 fantasy points per minute guy, but if he's got the ball in his hands more often, like tonight, I can expect to see a higher total out of him. Now, is he going to get you 50? Probably not. But I think he's got a good opportunity to get mid-30s, and at 5,700, that probably will be value. I don't love his 3x value. That, to me, tells me something's wrong. And what that is, I don't know. I'll still get to him because the starting minutes will be there. I'm not going to play 30 or 40% of him. I'll get to 15% of him, something like that. I like Chris Duarte. If he's going to be in the starting lineup next to LeVert, 5,600, he's getting 37 minutes per game right now. That might tick down, but with Brogdon out, it might stay right there. 0.76 fantasy points per minute is not enough. He does hit 5x value. Justin Holiday's a guy who I think sort of gets the shaft a little bit. He does get close to 30 minutes per night. He should be in the starting lineup, in my opinion. Off the bench, 0.56 fantasy points per minute is horrible. 3.5x value right now. I think he needs more opportunity, more ball in his hand. Indiana's not going to be a deep competitive team. I don't care what anybody says. I think they should be playing more Justin Holiday. That's just my opinion. I'm not the coach. I don't have any say. Jeremy Lamb, $3,700, 20 minutes, 16 points, 15 points. Gets close to value. You could look into that, but a lot of these low-minute guys, we're going to have to kind of see how it plays out in the rotations as far as Brogdon being out. It may be a game or two, depending on how long Brogdon's out. I don't even really know. It says day-to-day. So if Brogdon's back next week or late in the weekend or something, then it may not even matter. But get to some Sabonis, get to a tiny bit of Miles Turner, get to more McConnell and Duarte, and move on from Indiana. Let's see. Oh, team is what I'm after. Yeah, Brooklyn. Oop. Right, Indiana. Let's look at Brooklyn's injury report. Nick Claxton listed as day-to-day. Let's see what it says. I don't know if that's legitimate or not. Boy, it doesn't want to tell me. Okay, Claxton was held out of Wednesday's loss to the Heat. Come on, you guys. Seriously? All right, I'm going to wait for that to reload because it went away for no reason. So, Brooklyn. There it is. Found it. Okay, Claxton was held out of Wednesday's game. Lost to the Heat. Left Marcus Aldridge and Paul Millsap as the only true big men for Steve Nash. Should Claxton be able to play Friday night, it would likely drop Millsap out of the rotation, which is very interesting. Showing illness day-to-day, I mean, he'll probably play. Obviously, Kyrie Irving, we know why he's not out. Nothing to talk about really there until something changes on one end or the other. And then we will talk about it, but from a basketball perspective only. We're not going to talk politics. We're not going to talk world events unless it's NBA relevant. Obviously, this is NBA relevant, but there's so much politics in the subject. We're just not going to talk about it beyond saying that we're not going to talk about it. I don't want... the only opinions that matter and count for me right now are DFS or NBA basketball related. So let's keep it at that, and I'm good with that. I don't care what you think. I don't care any of that stuff, unless it's about DFS. That's what I want to talk about, or life, or family, or good stuff. I don't want to talk about any negative stuff. No point. I do enough of that. Okay, Brooklyn starting lineup: Harden, Harris, Durant, Bruce Brown. Let's go, Bruce Brown. Blake Griffin, still weird, old. All right, starting on Kevin Durant. $10,900, 35 minutes per game is good. 52.9 fantasy points per game. Here's a guy I didn't get to the other night and should have 1.5 fantasy points per minute, 32.8 usage. 4.8x value is the only thing that's raises my eyebrows a little, but that's just because of his salary. It just is what it is. It's hard when you're $11,000 basically to get, you got to score huge numbers. I mean, he's only under because 52.9 isn't 56. You know what I mean? So, but here's a guy that can get you 65 or 70 fantasy points on any given night. His usage is high. Get to some Durant. I will, probably 20, 30%. I got to 2 or 3% of him the other night for no reason, and he was in the optimal, I think. So that was tough. James Harden's salary, $9,800, I still like. I don't like his production. His ability is there, but he's got to go crazy now that he can't get to the free throw line at the same rate that he used to. 33.6 minutes a game is great. 1.16 fantasy points per minute is great. 28.2 usage is good. Only 3.9x value. That's bad. 39 fantasy points per game is also bad, in my opinion, for James Harden. He's going to have to figure out a way to get to the line by playing basketball. And that's something that he has failed at. If he's getting to the line 15 to 20 times a night, last season or the season before or whatever, 12 or 13 of them are nonsense. So, or are contact created by the offense, which isn't going to count this year. So he's got to figure out a way to do it the old-fashioned way. Drive the lane, pump fake. I mean, gee whiz, ever heard of that? Seriously, regular old pump fake. If you get good at it, you can get guys in the cookie jar and boom. He's going to have to figure out a way to change his game up. And I wish that there was better news there, but until he does, I'm basically fading Harden. Or until Durant gets injured and Harden has the ball a lot more. Which will happen. Keep that in mind. Interestingly, of course, we know Irving out. We go from $9,800 to $4,700 Bruce Brown. That's the disparity on this team. Disparity. Yes, that's it. That's the disparity on this team between talent. $4,700 Bruce Brown gets 24 minutes, only 18 fantasy points a game, only 0.79 fantasy points per minute. 4x value is not good enough. Is that right? There's only one guy on this team that gets his 5x value every night. It's Patty Mills. We'll get there. LaMarcus Aldridge. So fade Bruce Brown tonight, in my opinion. LaMarcus Aldridge, I do like his price point, 4,600. I don't like his minutes at 18. That's not enough. 1.12 fantasy points per minute is great. 20 fantasy points per game is horrible. Doesn't hit value. His usage isn't good enough. 20, I guess, third on the team. You gotta get it somewhere, right? I'm skipping LaMarcus. Joe Harris, 4,500. He does get minutes, man. There's one thing Joe Harris does is stand out there and run around in circles. $4,500, 31 minutes, only 0.58 fantasy points per minute. That's a total fade for me. 17 fantasy points per game or 18 really is not enough. Doesn't get his value. Skip him. Patty Mills, 29 minutes, 21 fantasy points, 0.74 per minute is not great. Off the bench, it's not terrible. 5x value. At 4,300, get a little Patty Mills as a value play if you need a value play there. If Claxton plays, 19 minutes, probably not enough. Only 16 fantasy points. There's just not a lot to like here down the bench. Get to some Durant. If you got to have Harden, get to him. I'm skipping him. That's it. Durant and a small percentage of Patty Mills. Everybody else can take a hike. All right, 2 games down, you guys. 5 to go. Hope we're getting some information. I mean, maybe I'm giving you too broad a brush. I don't know. Maybe I'm just saying, hey, play these 1,700 guys and not really giving you enough opportunities. I don't know. I'm just telling you what I think. And not everybody plays the way I do. Some people play one lineup. Some people play 2, 3, 4 lineups. Some people play the 20 lineup, 25 cent entries, which is awesome. That's great. I'm playing 150 lineups on most nights, and so when I'm talking percentages, that's what I mean. I'm going to get to certain percentages of guys in my cruncher that will make it into a certain number of lineups. So that's what I'm talking. Charlotte at Miami is next. 222.5 totals on this one, similar to last game. Charlotte at Miami. A lot of low-scoring stuff. It's going to be interesting. 222.5. Okay. We're going to start with Charlotte. I mean, I know where we're going to go here. I've been playing Miles Bridges every night. It's been really successful for me, as far as Bridges goes, at least. Maybe not overall yet, but we'll get there. Starting right there. Well, let's start with the injuries, because see how ahead of myself I get? PJ Washington listed as doubtful. Terry Rozier does have a Q tag on him, ankle day-to-day. So those 2 guys are it. Terry Rozier is listed right now in the starting lineup, but with the Q tag, so keep your eye on that. When I have a Q tag and I don't know with enough time, with let's say, if I don't know when there's an hour left before lock, he's out of my player pool. I don't recrunch at that point. I recrunch a lot starting at that point, leading up to lock, but once you're out in my opinion, which kind of antithetical to much, there's a lot of what other NBA DFS guys do, but for me, that's it. I just don't want to miss my lineups. LaMelo Ball, Rozier with a Q tag, Hayward, Bridges, Plumlee. Ooh, take a drink of water after that little voice crack. It's really interesting to going from not yabbering much during the day to yabbering a lot during the day has been really, really fun. And my voice has kind of been paying for it a little bit. My giant water bottle. Drink 2 or 3 of these a day, you guys. It's 40 ounces at least. Drink as much water as you can. Don't kill yourself. That's all. Okay, so we've looked PJ Washington, Terry Rozier, LaMelo Ball, Rozier, Hayward, Bridges, Plumlee. Starting with Bridges, of course, $8,000 salary. 35.2 minutes a game is great. 43.9 fantasy points per game. 1.25 fantasy points per minute. 5.49x value. You got to play Miles Bridges. You do. Now, Miami's going to block down defensively. They're one of the top 3 in the league in defensive rating right now. I think Utah and the Timberwolves are the other 3. Let's go Wolves. Or the other 2, let's go Wolves. You're going to have to get to Miles Bridges either way. At $8,000, I'm going to get to 20% of him or so. I like him. His game has just really taken off. He's been now. Will Jimmy Butler be all over him all night? Absolutely. Will that slow him down a little? Maybe don't expect 44 out of him. Maybe expect 38. I don't know. But for me, he's been playing so sort of almost transcendently that you got to get to some. And I will. LaMelo Ball, I'm not a big ball guy. Part of that is my own personal hometown bias because of Anthony Edwards and the BS that happened at the end of last year. $7,900 salary, 28 minutes is not going to cut it. 1.39 fantasy points per minute is great. Doesn't hit value. 39 fantasy points a game. I'll have a little bit of him, but I think you can get 39 fantasy points for cheaper than 7,900. Maybe not that much cheaper, but if I'm you, I'm going to look at Gordon Hayward here, 6,600. You can't guard Hayward and Bridges at the same time with Jimmy Butler. So that's going to leave one of them to kind of eat a little bit, in my opinion. Gordon Hayward, $6,600 salary, I like. His 35.6 fantasy minutes per game, I like. His 30.8 fantasy points per game could tick up for sure. Excuse me. Could tick up for sure. 4.6x value is not great. I want more out of him. But every time I don't play him, I needed him. So it's interesting. I will get to a little Hayward tonight. A lot less than Bridges. Probably a similar amount that I get to Ball, maybe 10 or 15%. I'm not sure Rozier's going to play. His numbers haven't been good enough to warrant anything yet. So we'll wait. We'll wait on Rozier. I think the numbers that are in there are last year's numbers, potentially, because he hasn't really played. Mason Plumlee, 6,200. I got to a bunch of him the other day, and it worked out well. 30 minutes per game, 31.7 fantasy points per game, 1.04 fantasy points per minute. Gets 5.12x value, one of only two players on the team that gets their value every night, Miles Bridges and him. So I'll definitely get to some Plumlee, probably as much as maybe 30%. I like his salary at 6,200. I wish it was more like 5,500. And that's pretty much it. I mean, Oubre, he hasn't shown up yet, in my opinion. $5,300 is a great price tag. 31 minutes per game is great. 22 fantasy points from him is not enough. 0.73 fantasy points per minute is not enough. 4x value is not enough. Kelly Oubre can shoot the lights out. He's got talent coming out of his hair follicles. I don't know. But he doesn't get the opportunity that he needs. His usage is only 18%. On a team where LaMelo gets a 30% and Miles Bridges gets a 25% usage rate, he needs the ball a little more. I mean, he needs the ball a little more. Now, maybe one of these days he will. Maybe he'll just break out and score 39 points and 50 or 60 fantasy points and just be a stud from there. But they haven't needed him to do that. They haven't asked him to do that. So it's hard from a DFS perspective to say play a bunch of Kelly Oubre. His salary is good, his minutes are good, and everything else is not good. So it's hard to say. Will he have some great games? Assuredly, yeah, you can guarantee that within reason. PJ Washington is out or doubtful, so we'll skip over him. Cody Martin, 25 minutes a game. Here's a guy who gets a little closer. 4.89x value. Cody Martin, almost 24 fantasy points, 0.94 fantasy points per minute. You can get to some of him at 25 minutes. If he was getting 20 or 18 minutes, then you kind of fade that. Like Ish Smith, for instance, 21 minutes per game. 22 fantasy points per game, 1 fantasy point per minute, 5.16x value, but Ish Smith is a play where it's like, that's a great value play if Terry Rozier sits out again. I played a bunch of him the other night. It worked out well for me. I think ownership was pretty low. Keep your eye on that. Because if Rozier is ruled out, then you're going to want to get to a little Ish Smith. I like Jalen McDaniels. I like Jaden McDaniels better, but Jalen McDaniels needs a little more production. 13 minutes a game, skip it. This one for me, it's going to be Miles Bridges. I'm going to get to a less LaMelo, less Gordon, more Plumlee, and that's it. If you want to get to a little Cody Martin or Ish Smith, depending on injury news for Rozier, do it. Okay. Let's look at Miami. That's the other thing. This is a pace-down spot for Charlotte because Miami's defense is crazy. So, at least right now. So, let's keep that in mind as far as the matchup goes. It does have a 222.5 point total. So, I mean, that's something where it's not like it's like a 205, like the previous game. So, there's going to be some production there. Keep that in mind, okay? Maybe the game will be loaded up with stocks on both ends. I don't know. Okay, moving on to Miami. Let's look at their injury report before I start talking about injured players. Just Oladipo still. Okay, sorry I had a little thing there. Okay, let's take a look here. I've got this little dialogue box I'm trying to get rid of on my injury report, and it won't go away. There it is. Got it. Miami, starting lineups. Kyle Lowry listed as probable. That means he'll probably play. Duncan Robinson, Jimmy Butler, PJ Tucker. Adebayo with a Q tag. He's not on the injury report that I'm seeing, so I'm not sure what that's about. Let me take a look and see if I can Google it. Okay, let's click on that. Heat's Bam Adebayo, downgraded to questionable, suffered knee injury during Wednesday's win over the Nets. The injury was expected to be minor, but the Heat may elect to be cautious and keep him sidelined. If Adebayo is ruled out, expect Dwayne Dedmon to draw the start. So here's the deal, guys. If Dwayne Dedmon gets the start, I mean, that'll be a value play we'll have to look at. But, well, I hate to get ahead of myself on this. You have to look at Charlotte a little closer if there's no Adebayo, because we know that Bam is a big part of what they do defensively. We know Dedmon can play some defense, of course, but he's not Bam Adebayo for obvious reasons. This is one of those things where let's keep a close eye on that, because Charlotte's players may become more valuable if Bam is out. Now you still have Lowry and Butler and Tucker playing hard defense, but Bam is a big part, like I said, of what they do. So that's something to consider. We'll pretend that Bam's going to play for now, and then go from there. Starting with Jimmy Butler, here's a $9,200 pay-up option. We know what he can do defensively. We've seen it his whole career. 34.8 minutes per game, 47.47 fantasy points per game, 1.36 fantasy points per minute. His usage is great, 5x value. There's a guy you're going to have to get to, especially with Adebayo out. He's going to have the ball in his hands more. Play Jimmy Butler. I'm going to get to maybe like 30% of him, maybe more. I don't know. We'll see what the crunch looks like, but probably between 30 and 40% of Butler in this matchup. I like it. I like Butler tonight. Bam Adebayo, $8,000 is awesome. 30.5 minutes, 37.3 fantasy points, 1.2 fantasy points per game. Usage is good again. Doesn't quite get his value. That's okay. I'm going to get to a little Bam. If he's in, not as much as I normally would because of that injury, he could be coming out at any time. Tyler Hero, I will get to at 6,400, 33 fantasy points a game on 30 minutes, 1.08 fantasy points per minute, 5x value averages, so that's great, 5.15. Get to some Tyler Hero. He's going to be in a bunch of my lineups. Kyle Lowry, $5,900. That's a heck of a price for a Kyle Lowry. Now, he is listed as probable, meaning he's been fighting something. 30 minutes per game, 23 fantasy points per game, only 0.78 fantasy points per minute. Terrible usage rate, not even 4x value. I'm fading Kyle Lowry beyond fades today, so he won't even be in my pool if I can help it, which I can. Duncan Robinson's another guy who gets a bunch of minutes but doesn't deserve them. 0.66 fantasy points per minute is not enough from a DFS perspective. Only 19 fantasy points. Doesn't come close to hitting value. Not a guy you can get to, in my opinion. You have to fade him. Dwayne Dedmon, 15.8 minutes per game, not enough. 1.17 fantasy points per minute is cool. He gets 4.5x value. If he gets Bam's minutes tonight and Dwayne Dedmon goes from 15.8 to mid-20s, 25, 26 minutes, you're going to have to look at him as a value play. His salary is only $4,000. And then you'll have to look down the bench. Does Markieff Morris get more minutes? What does it look like? You know what I mean? Who are they going to pick up? I mean, Haslam's not going to play. PJ Tucker will get more minutes at the 5. It's a really, really undersized 5. $3,900 for him. His production sucks as always. Miami's tough to project today. Jimmy Butler, I will get to. Hero, I will get to. Adebayo, I'll get a little of. Keep an eye on Dwayne Dedmon, but everybody else, I'm out. I'm out on Miami tonight. I usually don't play much from them outside of Butler and Hero. All right, let's look at the next game. Sacramento and New Orleans. I feel interesting about that game. I feel like there could be like a real overtime event. You know? You never know on that one. Could get scrappy out there. Let's start with Sacramento. Because why the frick not? All right. De'Aaron Fox, $8,000. Let's look at their injury report first, because you know how we get ahead of ourselves, and I say it every single time. Sacramento's one of those rare teams with 0 injuries right now, which is awesome. Good for them. Starting lineup looks pretty standard for them. De'Aaron Fox, Tyrese Halliburton, Little Mo Harkless, Harry Barnes, and Rashad Holmes. Okay, $8,000 salary, 35.5 minutes per game, 34.8 fantasy points per game. That's just under a fantasy point per minute. I'd like to see that tick up. His usage is there. Value is not. Here's a guy, De'Aaron Fox. He should be averaging somewhere at like 40, 45 fantasy points. Have a little more ball in his hands. I mean, he's got a lot of usage, so he should be producing more, in my opinion. And at $8,000, you're going to want or need him to. Against New Orleans, the likelihood is there. I think this is a little bit of a pace-up spot for them. You got to get 39.25 at him. That's 5 full fantasy points, nearly 5 full fantasy points more than he averages. A boom for him would be 48. I don't know what to tell you on De'Aaron Fox. I'll have a teeny bit of him. I like to play him tonight, maybe not. Not until he can prove himself a little more. I like Harry Barnes at 7,800, though. 37.3 minutes per game, 42.6 fantasy points per game, 1.14 fantasy points per minute. Those are the numbers I want to see out of De'Aaron Fox. Those are the numbers that you should be getting from your star point guard. That's what you need. A couple more minutes, a lot more production. 5.4x value for Harry Barnes. I'm going to get to him at 7,800. I'll have him in 20 or 30% of my lineups. I like him in this matchup as well against New Orleans. Let me take a look here. Usage is definitely lower than Fox. That's the interesting part, is the usage is significantly higher for Fox, but his production is significantly lower. So I don't know quite what to tell you on that. I mean, there's no reason in the world you're taking Fox over Harry Barnes tonight. No reason in the universe. Harry just produces better. I'm liking Barnes in this matchup. Rashawn Holmes at 7,500 doesn't get the minutes. 27, 1.36 fantasy points per minute is great. 27 minutes is not enough. 36.7 fantasy points per game. Can you get that for less than 7,500 elsewhere? Probably, but keep your eye on it because you never know. His usage is low. That's hard. Doesn't hit his value. For me, a low percentage, and just in case of the boom, but really, I'm really skipping him for the most part. Halliburton is a guy who's had a drop off, in my opinion. 28 fantasy points per game is not going to cut it. 32 minutes per game is great, but 14% usage doesn't hit value. Probably going to fade him. Buddy Hield is a guy I get to only when I need to squeeze in someone. $5,900 salary is great. 27 minutes is great. Actually, 1.02 fantasy points per minute. His usage rate is second on the team, 27.1. I'll probably get to a little more Hield after I've seen that than I would have prior. Probably so Harry Barnes, a little Hield, a little less De'Aaron Fox. Everybody else, I'm not seeing anything worth anything. Terrence Davis doesn't get the minutes. Mo Harkless, 23 minutes. You know, if you could get 29 minutes out of Mo Harkless, that'd be something to talk about. Although his fantasy points per minute production is horrible. Yeah, that's it. Get to some Harrison Barnes, a decent amount. Get to about half as much De'Aaron Fox, and about an equal amount of De'Aaron Fox as maybe Hield. Tristan Thompson, not enough minutes. Davion Mitchell, there's a guy at 3,900, so if you need a value play, you could squeeze him in, but at 18 fantasy points per game, probably not even worth it. That's all I got for Sacramento. Let's look at New Orleans and see where we're going with that. Let's look. Well, we know Zion's out. Josh Hart, day-to-day. Garrett Temple, doubtful. Let's look at Josh Hart's little information here. Injured during the season opener. His return to game action will slide rookie Herb Jones back to the bench, while Trey Murphy could also see a decrease. Murphy would also... Okay. But... Now, in the starting lineup for New Orleans, Devontae Graham, Alexander Walker, Ingram, Herb Jones, and Joe Val. who I love. We all know that. All right, starting with Brandon Ingram. Obviously, with Zion out, he's another guy who needs to lose 70 pounds quick. He just has to, or he won't be able to play. I've said that since the beginning. Brandon Ingram's 8,200, 37 minutes per game is great. 40.8 fantasy points is great. 1.1 fantasy points per minute is great. 30% usage is great. 4.98 value is as close to 5x as you're going to get without it being 5x. Get to some Brandon Ingram. I like the matchup for them. It's a pace-up spot a little bit. Get to some Brandon Ingram. I definitely will. He gets enough minutes. He produces over a fantasy point per minute. There's no reason at all not to get to some Brandon Ingram. Joe Val, same thing. Love Joe Val. $8,200, 35 minutes a game, 44 fantasy points, 1.27 per minute, 5.39x value. Get to some Joe Val. I'm going to have like 30% of Joe Val. No reason not to. Even at 8,200, which is getting pretty high for him, the production is there. The production is there. You only got to get 40 out of him to make it worth it. You only need 49 to hit value. Dude's going to have like... Man, don't quote me, but dude's going to have like 59. Devontae Graham, 6,100, 33 minutes a game, 32 fantasy points, or 31.5, almost a point fantasy point per minute. 5x value is there. Get to some Devontae Graham. I like that $6,100 price point. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, $6,000, 32 minutes, 31.3 fantasy points per game, 0.97, basically a fantasy point per minute, also hits 5x value. You got 4 guys in the starting lineup that hit their value on this team. That's something against Sacramento you have to consider. I guess 3 guys because Zion's not playing. Typically he does, and really Brandon Ingram basically does at 4.98. So you've got 4 out of the 5 starters here that are good plays. I mean, you can't get away from them, at least not completely. Herb Jones at 3,800, 23 minutes per game is not enough. 0.46 fantasy points. Kind of an afterthought. Doesn't get close to value. Just fade him. Trey Murphy. Yeah, nobody else really producing anything worth talking about on this team. Get to some Brandon Ingram. Get to more Joe Val. Get to a little less than Joe Val, Devontae Graham. A little less Alexander Walker. But those are the 4 guys. You can get to them and feel pretty good about them in 20 to 30% of your lineups. Maybe more on Joe Val and Ingram. Get to these guys for sure. Okay, another game down. Let's look at who's next. Dallas at Denver. Should be fun to watch. I think that should be. It's either going to be really fun to watch or really terribly boring. You know, it's kind of like no in between on that one. Dallas at Denver. We'll start with Dallas. No reason not to. Second night of a back-to-back for them. We know kind of what happens. Luca had, 39 fantasy points last night, but it was a total dud. He had like 7 at the half. It was pretty bad. I had way too much Luca last night, and it's because of that I didn't really, I didn't have a solid ROI the way I could have. Luca comes out and puts his 50 or 60 up, and boom, that pushes me way further. You know, I had some lineups in the top. I played 150 in the main and 150 in the late night. I got some lineups in the late night into the top, 100 or 200. Maybe like 5 or 6 lineups in the top 1,000. The earlier one, I think I got, a handful, maybe 5 into the top couple percent. If Luca would have performed, he was in all of those lineups. I'd had a good shot in the top 20 or 30 for sure. So that's what we try to aim at. So thanks for nothing, Luca. Just kidding. He's won me money before, so I can't really be mad at him. Second night of a back-to-back. I guess we'll see what happens. You know, Denver's a team who's underperformed. This could get pretty scrappy. 215.5 total, so not a world-beating total. Denver is our favorites in this game. I'm not sure they should be. I'm not totally sure why that is exactly. Luca at 10-7. It's hard to fade Luca, man, because he is who he is. He can get you 60 or 70. Is he going to throw up a stinker here and there? Definitely. But 40 points was a stinker last night, so that's kind of funny, you know. 35.8 minutes per game, 46 fantasy points per game, 1.28 fantasy points per minute. He hasn't really hit value yet, but that's because of his price point. Kristaps is out. You got to get to some Luca. No matter what, you got to play him. When he puts up 75, you're not going to want to be looking in on that from the outside. So get even if you have to get 10% of him, get him. I will always have 20, 30% no matter what. Tim Hardaway, 5,100. That's a great salary for him. 32 minutes per game, 23.4 fantasy points per game. Not enough. 0.73 fantasy points per minute. Not enough. 4.6 value. Not enough. I'll still get to a short percentage of him just in case he goes off. I've been playing a lot of Jalen Brunson lately, and I like it. Brunson is not listed in the starting lineup tonight. Luca, Hardaway, Bullock, Finney, DFS, and Dwight Powell. So that is what it is. Let's look at the injury report, because I may be talking out my butt here. Boban, listed as probable. Trey Burke, I think that's COVID. Sterling Brown, Porzingis out. Doncic, Hardaway, Bullock, DFS, and Powell. So that's a little bit different because they had Brunson in the starting lineup the other night. It apparently didn't work out well for them. We'll see what happens, because I like to get some Brunson just value-wise. $5,000. He's a 1.06 fantasy points per minute guy. He averages 5.68 value. Get to some Brunson a little bit. You know, if he's not going to get starting minutes, then that's something to think about. He's been getting 27 a game, though. So if he can get even 25 a game, you're still going to get some production out of him. And at $5,000, it might make it worth it. DFS I like at $4,700. That price is good on 32.3 minutes. Anytime you're getting minutes for cheap, I mean, it is what it is. They're starter minutes. But 0.77 fantasy points per minute, it doesn't do anything for me. And so even though he hits 5.32x value, I'm not going to have a lot of DFS. You can squeeze him in as a value play when you say, okay, I've got $4,700 left. Who do I play? That might be the guy. But after last night's performance, man, I'm going to be looking more at Klieber. That's what I'm going to be doing. Before we get to Klieber, though, let's talk Dwight Powell. In the starting lineup, of course, $4,600. You know, the minutes aren't starter minutes. 23.5 is more like a bench roll. 18 fantasy points per minute is more like bench points. 0.77 fantasy points per minute. More like bench numbers. 3.9x value, more like bench numbers. So Dwight Powell's a starter kind of in one of those situations where he is starting the game and finishing the game. That's how I kind of look at him. And so you don't know what you're going to get out of him. Maybe he gets 5 stocks in 2 minutes. I don't know, but for the most part, I'm skipping Powell. I mean, it's just the minutes aren't there. Now, Maxie Klieber, $3,900. He does average less minutes, but I don't know how many minutes he got yesterday. I could look it up, but it's just extra time. I'm going to get to some Klieber today to see if he can repeat. I think he had 50 fantasy points or something the other night. Last night, 1.03 fantasy points per minute right now, 5.5x value. And at $3,900, you've got to get to some of him. You got to get to some Maxie. Reggie Bullock is in the starting lineup tonight. Only 19.8 minutes so far, but if he's going to start and get 25, 26, 27 minutes, it might be something to look at from a value perspective. Right now, half a fantasy point per minute is nothing. His value is nothing. His fantasy points per game is nothing. But I think they're just going to try some things out down there. They're going to look and say, okay, what are we doing and what are we going to do differently? So for me, you got to maybe get to a little Reggie Bullock. Maybe not a lot. But maybe like a few percent. Just get him in a couple lineups just to see what he does. You know, it's one of those things. It's weird to me that they're playing this much with the starting lineup. I mean, it's early in the season. I guess now's the time to do it. But looking at this team, get to some Luca. Get to a little Jalen Brunson. Price-wise, you can get to a little DFS. Get to more Maxie Klieber than any of those guys except for Luca. That's really all there is to look at on this team. Some Luca, some Maxie, a little DFS, a little Jalen Brunson, and then move on to the next team. Let's look at Denver. Denver's going to be interesting. And I'm going to wow, something of all this gas. It's crazy. Like, can't talk because I'm burping for some reason. Not that you guys care or need to know, but what the heck, you know? I got nothing to hide. Refreshing Dallas's. Let me refresh the starting lineup then too. Starting lineup stays the same. Okay, Sterling Brown, Boban, Kristaps. Okay, let's look at Denver. Jokic is listed as questionable, still with his knee day to day. The other day he said, "Oh, it's not a big deal," but then he sat again. Denver's starting lineup as of right now is Monte Morris, Will Barton, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, and Jokic with the Q tag. Expect him to play as of right now. Whether that means he's going to produce at a high level, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe he leaves in the second quarter. Maybe he leaves at the half again. I'm not sure. He left early enough, like at the half last game, where he had 39.2 fantasy points at the half, and everyone's going, "Yes, Jokic, I'm so glad I got to him." And then boom, he doesn't come back out, and you're like, "Oh, what the heck?" Dude was on pace for 75 points. Insane. That being said, you still got to play him. I mean, if he's playing, then you got to play him. Just you gotta. He's another one of these guys where you don't want to miss. You don't want to be on the outside looking in when he gets 80. 11,100 is hard to swallow, especially with the knee injury. Maybe you don't get to 30 or 40% of him. Maybe you get to 8% of him, 12% of him, 15%, something like that. 29.5 minutes per game. You'd love to see that be like 34, but at his size, he'd just end up injured if he does that. Dude's obviously not the most athletic guy in the universe. He's out there moving like molasses, but still, because of his size, he's able to dominate. 52.45 fantasy points per game is awesome. 1.78 fantasy points per minute is awesome. Misses value a little bit. But you're going to have to get to some Jokic whether you like it or not. Keep your eye on the injury report. That's all you can do. Is he going to play? Is he not? It doesn't start till 9 p.m. That sucks so bad because you might not have information till well after lock. You might not have another guy that's even close to replace him with. Unless you're going to play unless you're going to feel real good about replacing him with like Nurkic or Zubats or I guess Jarrett Allen potentially in the late game. That's a tough one. Michael Porter Jr. has not earned any of his money yet. He earned it before he got it, and then he got it and stopped earning it. So that's pretty typical for players like him. $6,800 salary, 31.8 minutes a game, 0.8 fantasy points per minute, 3.7x value. This guy just needs to show up. I mean, I think he's just having some hangover. Like, hey, I've got the money now. What am I playing for? And I hate that attitude among players, but it exists. We've seen it over and over and over again. Andrew Wiggins, top example of that. But it happens. You look at Kristaps. Dude sucks. I don't care what anybody says. If you don't play, you suck. I mean, that's the thing. There's 3 or 4 players in the league that don't like to be in the league. They don't like to play in the league. They don't like, and he's one of them. And Porter, hopefully, he doesn't spend much time on the bench and he keeps working hard. But he's going to have to produce to earn that money. 0.8 fantasy points per minute from him is not going to cut it. 3x value is not going to cut it. $6,800. He needs to be more like $5,000. I'm going to fade him for the most part. I might get a low percentage just to make sure. Will Barton's a better play tonight, in my opinion. $5,800. You're saving $1,000. You're getting 2 more minutes. You're getting 6.5 more, six more fantasy points. 0.94 fantasy points. You're getting 5.4x value. Will Barton's the play. Michael Porter is not. That's just plain and simple. Aaron Gordon, you can get to a little bit of him at 5,000, 30 minutes per game. He doesn't produce much, 23 fantasy points per game, less than 5x value. And for the most part, you're skipping him. Monte Morris is another guy, 0.58 fantasy points per minute. You're skipping him. Just going down the list, I'm like trying to find someone. I mean, you'd think that there would be some opportunities here, but what do you got? One guy on the whole team averaging a fantasy point per minute, at least that gets any significant minutes. Highland averages 1.54, but on garbage time only. Austin Rivers, terrible. You got one guy worth playing. I mean, really, realistically, you're going to play Jokic on this team, and you're going to get to Barton. If you want to squeeze 10% of Michael Porter Jr. on a coin flip, like a, hey, just in case. Otherwise, you're pretty much skipping freaking everybody on Denver. That's a surprise to me because I was hoping to find some better players. And Jokic is injured, so maybe Denver's just not the right team. I mean, if he plays, you got to get to some Jokic, but maybe Will Barton is the only one. At 5,800, you're going to get decent value out of him. He's the only one on the team averaging 5x value or better. So take it how you want to, but yeah, it's tough. Denver looks tough to me tonight. Other than Will Barton, get to some Will Barton. Next game. LA at Portland. That's Clips. So, let me pull the injuries here. Clips, okay. Song annoys me if you can hear it. But it's on, it is what it is. Clippers. Okay. Start with the clip. Get to Portland. Portland's interesting tonight. We'll get to them, but this is one of those teams. There's just nobody to play. This is similar. I mean, there may be a couple guys, but Let's look at the injury report. Marcus Morris listed as out indefinitely. Preston out indefinitely. Kawhi Leonard, we know what's happening there. Questionable to play this season, it says. Serge Ibaka out indefinitely. Third straight game on the shelf for Morris. Missing time to strengthen his left knee, which has been bothering him since last season. Batum has started in place. Batum, he's another one of those guys that got his money and quit playing. He's made so much money. I'm telling you, Batum is a guy who should have been out of the league 8 years ago. People just keep giving him money. They throw money at him for 6 points a game. It's terrible. It's freaking ridiculous. And it's not like he's Pat Bev where he's putting up huge defensive performances either. He's just kind of standing around mostly. Not a good player. Not a good player, in my opinion. And take it for what you like. I don't really care what you think, personally. And I wouldn't expect you to care if you're a big Clipper fan. But that's my opinion, and that's what we're here to do, talk basketball. And sometimes to talk smack about basketball players, because that's what we're talking about. So, starting lineup, Reggie Jackson, Bledsoe, Paul George, Nick Batum, and Ivica Zubac. Just looking at this, the disparity in salary here is crazy. Paul George at $10,100. The next closest is $5,800. That should tell you all you need to know right there about this team. You got to get to some Paul George. I mean, he's the guy. 32.1% usage rate, 1.48 fantasy points per minute. He's getting almost 49 fantasy points a game. 4.83 value. That's salary based. You're going to have to get to some Paul George. I'm going to have him. 30% of my lineups are better. I mean, you have to. He's the only one on this team that matters. That being said, there might be a couple of little plays here that we'll take a look at. Reggie Jackson's a guy who's never performed well for me. He always has big nights when I don't have him, but never done a dang thing for me. 34 minutes a game, 0.8 fantasy points per game, doesn't hit his value. Eric Bledsoe's a guy I do get to. Here's a guy who hits 5.6x value, 1.08 fantasy points per minute. He's cheaper than Reggie tonight, $5,400. He gets 28 minutes, over 30 fantasy points. Get to a little bit of Eric Bledsoe. You have to. Morris, 0.54 fantasy points per minute, skip. Batum, 0.8 fantasy points per minute, skip. Zubac gets close to 5x value, 4.98. It's about as close as you can get, 1.07 fantasy points per minute. But dude gets bench minutes as a starter, 21 minutes. I don't like that. I hate that, in fact. So Zubac isn't a guy you can just run to. He's just not. And he's going to lose more minutes if he keeps underperforming. Terrence Mann, 29 minutes, 25 fantasy points, 0.88 per minute. It's not good enough, but 5.53 value. At $4,600, you got to get to some Terrence Mann tonight. You just do. I mean, Portland's not the crazy defensive team. Norm Powell might be back, but we'll take a look at them next. You get to some Terrence Mann. He's going to get you almost 30 minutes, 26 fantasy points. He's cheap, $4,600. I'll definitely get to some Terrence Mann this evening. Ibaka out. Luke Kennard, 4,000, 26 minutes. Underproduces at 0.74 fantasy points per minute, 4.8x value. If you want to get to him as a value, you can, but for the most part, you've got to skip him. There's nobody else on the team even worth talking about if I'm looking at this. That's it. Get to some Paul George, a little bit of Bledsoe, a little bit of Terrence Mann, more Terrence Mann than Bledsoe, and the rest of the team is terrible. So keep that in mind. Okay. All the Clippers fans are like sending me hate mail. They're not. They don't care. I have no opinion that matters. So, and keep in mind that's all this is. It's just my opinion. And everybody in basketball always has different opinions. No matter how well your opinion is thought out, there's somebody who thinks the opposite. That's life. Get over it. That's just life. That's called being free. Everybody gets to think what they want, and I'm down for that. Even if I hate it, even if I disagree, I'm down for it. I have no right to tell anybody else what to think. So I can tell people why what they think is silly, but that's not what we do here, unless it's basketball related, and then we do. All right, let's look at Portland's injuries. Anybody else have to go through the alphabet sometimes? Okay, MNO Portland. Probably not. I'm just an idiot. It's fine. Norm Powell, questionable day-to-day. Tony Snell, out. Let's read about Powell. Injured his knee last Saturday. Missed the last 2 games as a result. Should Powell be cleared to play Friday night, Nasir Little would move back to the bench. Little would be worth hanging on to in the short term, as the Blazers are unlikely to ask Powell to take on full minutes. That tells me maybe that if he comes back, he'll probably be on some kind of a restriction, especially because if it's listed as a left patellar tendinopathy, that's something that sticks around. That's not a little tendonitis, you get a shot and you go home and you play the next day. Tendinopathy is a recurring event. It's something that just continues. There's going to have to be some management if he doesn't want that to be sort of a continuation or a continual wow, cannot get the words out today. If he doesn't want that to be a continual problem, they'll have to manage it. That's what I'm trying to say, people. All right, looking at CJ McCollum, 8,700 as a pay-up option. Anytime you can get these guys under 9,000, you feel good about it. 44.4 fantasy points per minute, 32.5 minutes, 1.37 fantasy points per minute, over 30 usage, which is rare, but awesome. 5x value, awesome. Play some CJ. Why not? This is one of those games that could end up being a shootout, Paul George versus the world, right? Damien Lillard, people have been dogging Dame. He's coming back at him on Twitter, 9 seasons, all this stuff. Well, 18 points isn't good enough, but 31 minutes a game, 33 fantasy points. He's still over a fantasy point per minute guy. His value hasn't been there. I'll be honest, 3.9x value is not going to cut it from Lillard. $8,400 salary is going to cut it. He's going to make it into some of my lineups because you can't hold Dame down forever. And eventually he's going to have his night. He's going to break through. He's going to go on a 10-game tear where he scores 50 points a night. It is what it is. But at 8,400, it's hard to just forget about Lillard. I'm going to have him in more lineups than probably you, but that's fine. I'm going to be ready for when he busts it, and he will. So keep your eye on Dame tonight. Sure, why not? Nurkic at 7,200. 31 fantasy points per game on 25 minutes is great. 1.2 fantasy points per minute. Usage is a little low. Over a 4x value, which isn't great. If Powell comes back, those numbers could change a little. Powell 6,300, 24 minutes per game. Not really producing yet. Of course, some of those numbers might be last year's. I don't know if he played earlier this season yet or not. It's only been a few games. Keep an eye on Powell. I don't love his salary. Little will be back to the bench if Powell comes. If Powell doesn't, Little's 4,700 though. It makes him a value play in my opinion. 20 points per game or 20 fantasy points per game. 4.34 value. The only other person that's worth looking at on this team, Anthony Simons, 22.5 minutes, 0.96 fantasy points per minute, 5x value. It's there, 4,300. If you're interested in sort of squeezing a bench player in at the end of your studs and duds lineup or your stars and scrubs lineup, whatever you want to call it. No one else really worth talking about. Dennis Smith Jr. doesn't get the minutes he would need. His value's close. His fantasy points per minute is close. His minutes are not close. Cody Zeller had a good game the other night, 4,100. I fade him. Just doesn't put up the numbers, even in a good game. Robert Covington is who he is, 0.57 fantasy points per minute. Not going to cut it. Can he have a big game? Sure. Is he an optimal sometimes? Sure. 4,300. Get to a little bit of them, 10% or something. But realistically, you're looking at 3 guys on this team, and it's McCollum, Lillard, and Nurkic. That's it. You're going to get to more McCollum. You're going to get to more Nurkic, a little less Nurkic, and you're going to get a little less Damian Lillard than Nurkic. That's what I'm looking at on Portland. This game, although Vegas has it at 223, which actually is not bad, to me, this has like an overtime feel to it, in my opinion. So, get some of these guys if you want. Play Paul George, play Lillard, play McCollum, play Nurkic, and then go to the bank, hopefully. Or bank online, whatever. Only one game left, you guys. It's crazy. Time flies, right? Okay, put that back. Game. Off of that. Cleveland, Los Angeles. This is going to be interesting because this is a game I feel like Cleveland's going to win. We're going to start with Cleveland. The line on this one, 221.5. So there's not a whole lot as far as real crazy lines tonight. There's no 230s or 240s that I'm seeing. 223. I think 223 is the high. Indiana at Brooklyn, 223.5. Charlotte at Miami, 222.5. And a lot of teams are sort of stuck right around 221, 222. LA at Portland, 223. Cleveland at LA, 221.5. Cleveland's one of these teams, man. They surprise the heck out of you. That's what they do, and they've been playing a lot better. So I hope they continue to do that. I like it when teams that maybe you don't expect come out and win a bunch of games. Okoro listed as sideline with a hamstring, could miss several games. Let me see what it says here. ruled out for tonight, so that's fine. Darius Garland, Sexton, Markkanen, Mobley, and Jarrett Allen in the starting lineup. Jarrett Allen. It always sounds like saying Jared Allen, and I want to say Jarrett Allen because, of course, I'm a Minnesota boy, so I think about Jarrett Allen, the football player. Either way, bear with me if it sounds like I'm saying Jared. I really am saying Jarrett. I'm just saying it quickly, so keep it in mind. Anyway, Cleveland's interesting. There's not one guy over $8,000 on this team. There's not even one guy at $8,000 on this team. Starting with Jarrett Allen, $7,100 salary, 31 minutes per game, 31.54 fantasy points per game, 1.01 fantasy points per minute. His usage is so low. It's like he gets a lot of putbacks and stuff, I think. 4.4x value is not quite there. That being said, I like him. I think you got to play him. I think tonight he's going to get more than 31.5 fantasy points. You need 35.8 for him to hit value. He's more likely to boom than bust tonight, in my opinion. The Lakers aren't who you want them to be. They just aren't as much as you hope. Anthony Davis is listed with the probable tag tonight, so if he plays, Allen will have a little bit of a harder time. But get to a little bit of Allen. I've been sort of fading Sexton lately, but let's look at him anyway. $6,900 salary is good. I don't mind that. 30.8 fantasy point or 30.8 minutes per game, 27.6 fantasy points, 1.9 fantasy points per minute. Usage is there, 28.2, almost 30, so that's good. 4x value is not great. I think Mobley's kind of the story of this team. Mobley, in my mind, Rubio, but Mobley at 6,600, 33 minutes per game, 35.4 fantasy points, 1.07 fantasy points per minute. I don't love his usage, but 5.3x value. That's something to think about. So in the starting lineup tonight, he's the only one that hits 5.5x value or better. So look at Mobley. Young guy, good player. I'll probably get to some of him, maybe 20-25%. Garland, he's a guy who I fade often, 6,500, 30 minutes per game, 26.7 fantasy points per game is not good enough, 0.88 per minute. I think he was out. He was out and Rubio was starting. That's probably why that's so low so far. Give him a couple games and we'll see where he's at, but 4x value is not going to cut it in my opinion. I love Ricky Rubio, 28.2 minutes per game. I think it's probably going to be more like 22 or 23, and that's because Rubio started a couple games there, and he's not now, so that number will tick down. 30.8 fantasy points per game. Expect that to tick down a little, 1.09 fantasy points per minute. Expect that to stay right about there. He's always been a fantasy point per minute guy or better. 25.2 usage, that'll come down, but 5.5x value should stay pretty similar. Get to a little Rubio if you need to fill in some spots from a bench position, if you have to get there. Lowry Markkanen, 5,600, 31 minutes, 27 fantasy points. Value's not quite there. I usually fade him, but I don't mind that salary, so keep that in mind. Okoro is out. Chetty I love, but never gets a chance. When he does, he always blows it up, but 2.4x value makes him a non-factor. That's all I got for Cleveland. Play some Allen, not a lot. Play some Sexton, not a lot. Play more Mobley, but still not 30 or 40%, maybe 20%. Play a little Garland, not a lot. Play a little Rubio, not a lot. That's it. Move on. Little Markkanen if you want to, but probably not for me. Aren't my opinions so specific? Anyway, let's look at the Lake Show, which is kind of what they are right now. That's sort of show, not in a good way. Westbrook, Bazemore, LeBron with the Q tag. He hasn't played, I think the last two he's been out. Anthony Davis listed as probable, and DeAndre Jordan, who's pathetically terrible. Anyway, Anthony Davis, $10,600, 38 minutes a game, 53.4 fantasy points, 1.4 fantasy points per minute. The other day, he was ruled in with not a lot left before lock, and I just didn't get to him, and it actually hurt me. Over a 30 usage rate is great. 5x value is great. Get to some Anthony Davis. He's listed as probable. You're going to have to play him. Maybe like 30 or 40% of him. So I will definitely do that, whether LeBron plays or not. LeBron with the Q tag. I don't know what to think about that if I'm being serious. Let's look at the injury report and see if it says anything new. Anthony Davis probable, Rajon Rondo questionable. He's not really playing. Let's look at what it says about LeBron. More opportunities for Westbrook. Ellington, yada, yada, yada. Doesn't say much. And it's going to be one to keep your eyes on LeBron. For me, he'll be out of the player pool until there's at least a P tag on him. or probable tag, you know what I'm saying? I love Rusty at 9,400 still, especially if LeBron is out. 36.2 minutes per game, 43.78 fantasy points per game, 1.21 fantasy points per minute. Usage rate is right up there with 30. Those three guys are dominating the usage rate, almost 90% of the usage to those three guys alone, which is interesting. You got to get 44.5 out of Rusty. I think you will get that in this game. Some of those guys don't quite get there on value, and there's nobody really down the stretch here to look at too closely. Malik Monk, 25.6. Kent Bazemore gets minutes at 28.2, but doesn't produce squat. 5.52 fantasy points per minute. Just fade him. For me on LA, this is kind of a real simple one. Play a bunch of Anthony Davis, play a little bit of Westbrook, and if you want to get to a little Carmelo, I wish Carmelo was like 3,900 instead of 5,000. That'd feel better as a value play. 22 fantasy points per game is probably not worth 5,000. If you feel like he's going to get a few more minutes, if LeBron is out, then maybe get to him. But I'll probably just hit Anthony Davis at a high percentage, Russell Westbrook at a lesser percentage, and move on from LA. So, all right, guys, that's crazy. We made it through. Let me put this back real quick. Let's hit select all. Okay. And that's it. Today's Friday. This is the last show of the week. So I hope you guys have a good weekend. I hope to. It's going to be a little bit busy. Let me get back to you on the screen here. Here I come. All right. Looks like nobody's melting. I think we've covered everything. We covered all 7 games. It went fairly quick. Some pretty good stuff. Some pretty obvious numbers on a lot of players. I hope we have a pretty good day, you guys. I for one, thought the last 2 days were going to be exceptional for me. I felt so good about my lineups and where we were going. I felt really great about my crunches. And then I just missed 1 or 2 guys, which happens. That's just the name of the game. That's just how it goes. And that just is what it is. So do the best you can, you guys. My information is just mine. I hope it helps. I hope the information that I'm showing is useful. If it's not, I hope you have fun. I know I do. I love doing this. I'm going to keep bringing it to you. In a couple of weeks, we're going to have a little bit better of a produced show. We're going to have the system down a little better. Hopefully the information will be a little more tight. That's the goal. So have a good weekend. Hit the subscribe button. I need subscribers. I do. Even if you're not going to watch every day, you can come to it later. Hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell if you are interested in watching every day. Hit the like button on this video or on this live stream. I could use the likes. The more the better, right? I'm going to do this regardless of whether people are watching or not. I've done some shows to 0 people, and that's fine too. That's great. Because I'm going to do this anyway. And I get a chance to feel like I'm getting to talk about the thing that we love, and that's DFS and NBA. And I love talking about those things. You don't always get the opportunity to go in depth on a player-by-player basis or a team-by-team basis. There are other guys that do it, and there's guys that do it great. There's other guys that I watch that do it great, better than me. But I love having fun doing it. It's a great time. I'm not looking to make money. I'm not looking to be a tout. I'm just looking to kind of go through and do some of the work kind of for you guys, so you can say, hey, well, that is a good idea, or yeah, that is a good opinion, or I totally disagree with that, and this is why. All of that is fair, in my opinion. Which is all this is. So follow me on Twitter at Jon B One DFS. It's JONBONE DFS, or Jon Bone DFS. That's just kind of how that worked out. So no jokes. I don't care. Make jokes, fine. But Jon B, JONBONE DFS. That's my Twitter handle at Jon B One DFS. Find me there. Shoot me questions, whatever. I don't care. I'm open. Subscribe and like. Share with your friends. Do what you got to do, if you want. I don't really care. And let me know. So other than that, you guys have a great weekend. Have fun with your families or yourself or your roommates or, whoever you're hanging out with. And that's about it, you guys. Peace out.